should have spoke like Arthur Muller, like really deep voiced. And I was just standing there, and he said, you know, you look really nice in a suit, in a really mincing voice. And to say I was intimidated, to say the least. The suit was dark grey, so I couldn't actually leave there and then. And it was like the shortest minute of my life, or the longest minute of my life.
It's not a thing that you might be, I don't think that you'd be attacked when you went in there, or indeed if you're in the bog and someone that was gay that was in there. It's still a thing that we think that if someone is gay, they're going to shag everything in sight, including children and barnyard poultry, which is something that...
Homophobia elevates the irrational to the status of fact. Its extraordinary power isn't lost on mainstream AIDS organizations. Desperate to avoid being marginalized, they still hold to the line that AIDS affects everyone. 10 years ago, it was very different.
The epidemiology was still uncertain. It was difficult to predict how the epidemic was going to go, and it looked possible that we could be facing a very serious heterosexual epidemic in the way that a serious self-sustaining heterosexual epidemic has occurred in the States.
To meet this perceived threat, large numbers of AIDS workers had to be recruited quickly. And there was only one section of the population that had any experience of AIDS,
right.
And that was the gay community.
I was going around the country telling overwhelmingly heterosexual audiences that they were at risk every day of their lives from HIV and AIDS, and they had to protect themselves, and AIDS was equally everybody's problem, and it didn't matter whether you were 88 and lived in Harrogate, or whether you were 12 or what have you and lived in Surrey. But AIDS was everybody's problem, and we were all equally at risk, and we all ought to be fearful and all the rest. You know, the real climate of fear stuff.
By the late 80s, AIDS had effectively been degayed. The effect of this degaying produced a marked policy shift in those organizations that had been at the forefront of the fight against AIDS. AIDS, as a gay plague, was marched firmly back to the closet.
It's quite late.
Now, those mainstream AIDS organizations, once shunned by government and health authorities, jumped on the bandwagon. AIDS was now everybody's problem.
Almost all of them started as gay organisations. And all now, almost all, are now desperately denying their roots. Now they know deep down that they have gay volunteers and they're dealing with gay clients, and a majority of each. But the message they keep giving out is, we're a straight organisation, we're here for everyone, we're here for straight people generally. And why on earth, how on earth has this happened? Well, I'm reminded of what it felt like growing up as a gay teenager. I was terribly frightened. I didn't want anyone to know. But I felt safe in an odd sort of way, as long as I kept it secret, as long as I kept silent about being gay. All of this crushing fear of violence wasn't going to happen to me. Just as I feared losing the love of my parents and my friends if I told them, I think AIDS organisations fear losing money and losing sympathy.
Do you get more funds if you say you're not a gay organisation?
It's not solely... the advice... Oh, no, we needed to be able to get as many people with AIDS... No, we need as many people with AIDS to tell their stories, to show how diverse people with AIDS are, so that the greatest number of people in the country are touched by that.
80% of people with AIDS in London, 4 out of 5 of the people that the Trust is supposed to be serving are gay men. Now the trouble is, he keeps dodging that fact. He shouldn't be afraid to say, look, the real epidemic affects gay men overwhelmingly. I don't know, perhaps he's afraid of scaring off funders or supporters, but what he should be doing is recruiting these people to fight the real epidemic, not trying to appease the bigots, because in the end, that doesn't work anyway.
My own concern is that we don't get any money going to what I call a lovers charity. You know, the AIDS people, the Terence Higgins Trust, because AIDS, unfortunately, except for those hemophiliacs, is in fact a lover's illness. It's a self-inflicted lover's illness. It's decimated the arts world in the States and made a good contribution to decimating the arts world over here. It's not a genuine charity. My government, to its great discredit, I believe, has given something like, I think it's 10 billion now, in order to advertise and take silly stories to youngsters about the dangers of AIDS.
While doing this interview, we've received a press notice from the Press Association about a statement made by the MP Terry Dix in a debate on the National Lottery.
And if I hear, or if I find out, that organisations like the Terence Higgins Trust or any organisation connected with AIDS gets a penny from this, by God, I'll kick up hell in here.
I can't believe the cruelty of an elected politician who is in effect saying that people with AIDS deserve what they've got, should not have the support of the National Health Service, should not have the support of organisations helping them to cope with the most complex and awful illness.
3 hours after the speech, I was driving in my car and I heard a little clip of Terry Dix's speech, and I heard a spokesman from the Terence Higgins Trust come on the radio, and my delight turned to dismay as I heard her say that it wasn't just gay men that were affected by the epidemic, but they were all poor little children, innocent heterosexuals that were affected as well. And it seemed to me that that was catastrophic. The thing to do was to face the bigot down and say to him, yes, gay men are overwhelmingly affected by this epidemic, and they have as much right to health and life as any child or any heterosexual. And they didn't. They let us down.
It's been a fundamental fact of life for us as gay men to have to cope with multiple bereavement, with many of our friends being ill and dying. And we're given some bland pap. I think that's what I resent most, that so much of the advertising and the PR and the promotion of these mainstream AIDS agencies is all about trying to de-gay it, to generalize and to make it as bland as possible.
The problem with the Big Bang theory is that the mathematics don't sustain it. If you look at the public health laboratory's figures over a 10-year period, the number of heterosexual men and women diagnosed as HIV positive was 7,400. If you then break that figure down and look at how they became infected, a number of surprises emerge. 2,928 were infected by drug use, 2,790 from a foreign source, either living abroad or back in Britain. 1,369 were infected by blood products, the vast majority of them haemophiliacs, and only 119 through bisexual partners. One of the main myths exploded. Finally, a category entitled None of the Above. This is heterosexual AIDS. 182 people, less than 20 cases a year. If you then make allowances for human nature and assume that many of these people would, when questioned, have denied having sex with the other categories, or probably didn't even know they had, the number may well disappear completely. In Britain, heterosexual AIDS has probably never existed.
I was at a remembrance service.